I came to Lithuania, I think, probably about a decade ago with my friend James McGuinness, and we came at that time. He wanted to try and establish an exchange between an art university in Ireland and the Cones Art Institute, the textile department. So I remember one sunny morning we arrived into the Art Institute and sat down and met with some of the people there to talk about making an exchange. And the years after that it became the formal Erasmus exchange. But there was a nice set of relationships established there at that time. Then in the years after that I became involved in the Cones Biennale and was a board member, have been a board member of the Biennale for quite a few years. And that gave me again a point of contact living between Ireland and Lithuania that's remained right through to today. My interest there is really art, how art projects and art and culture can sort of intervene in the society. Everyone feels like identity is some sort of pure gold that only they have, and I think it's interesting. I was in Mark Twain's country recently, which is around Missouri and Mississippi, and I was actually at an art seminar over there, and I went to visit the confluence between the Missouri and the Mississippi River, and it was very interesting because these are two huge rivers in the States, you know, and I think when I think of my history, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, you really feel in your history you've got something that is absolutely special. And yet now, in my river of history, this Lithuanian blood has entered into it. It won't touch my blood, but somehow or other my DNA, my Irish DNA, has been interacted with this Lithuanian DNA a little bit further down the river. And I'm sure it's an experience that's happened in history over and over again, but I think, you know, when DNAs get mixed, there's obviously idiosyncrasies, but there's also, I think, something to watch, something to look out for. So that's my sense of identity. And, you know, obviously, whenever anybody comes to a new country and a new space and takes time to get to know things, and, you know, when you eat shashlik, the way sometimes the meat gets between your teeth, like there are certain things that, you know, you get caught on sometimes when you're interacting with the official world, where you don't know so much the protocols for that interaction. But yeah, you know, I could live in Lithuania forever during the summer. I like the image of the river, because in the Old Testament Moses was put into the basket in the river, and he had to flow into all sorts of different places. That's an image that Krzysztof Wodiczko uses. He's an artist I like very much. This idea that, you know, you're in a river and you flow and everything keeps changing. And there's no doubt, you know, what does emigration mean? Well, you know, I'm not an emigrant in the proper sense, you know. There are people who, you know, really hold that experience. I suppose one of the things that I often think about when we talk about the idea of emigration or migration, we often try to tie it down, to catch it, to understand it. And like a lot of things, you know, sometimes you can't understand and you have to live without knowing exactly what this means. And I think there's very different experiences in this thing called emigration. For instance, if I'm a political refugee, that's one experience. I don't know it particularly well, but it's a very particular experience. If I'm a young child that's just been put on a plane and arrived in a country without any papers, without any parents, that's a whole other experience. I think within this idea of, emigration, there's a whole lot of different experiences. But I think one thing that's common, there's very different particularities in each one, but I do think that one thing that is common is this sense that we don't control the world. We don't control our future. We don't even control the present moment. People know instinctively the world is fractured. There's lots of gaps. There's lots of shortcomings. We feel it personally and we feel it in terms of our society. And at some point in time, we have to, I think, sit down and say there are certain problems that we're facing that we don't know the answers to. And we're just going to have to collectively, and I think collectively is an important word here, that rather than just thinking about me, myself, we have to think about an us, a we, together, a collective, and find a way to begin to sort of, ask the questions in an honest way and begin to work through them and live through in order to find answers. But in saying that, I'm not saying that everything to do with emigration is a bad thing. My grandfather was born in Penang in Southeast Asia. Don't ask me why that happened. I don't even feel any piece of Southeast Asia in my blood. And yet somehow or other, my grandfather was born and lived there. His father and mother died, and he was brought back to Ireland as an orphan. So, and I'm sure I could sit down with any ordinary, Lithuanian person and find the same amazing stories of how people found ways to just survive. And I think that's the interesting thing. If someone said to me, what does globalization mean to you? I'd actually say it means nothing. Because as a term, I just don't understand it. It's too complicated and too complex for me to even try and get my head around. But in saying that, I do remember during the last Biennale, with this project that was run by 3 artists, an Irish artist and 2 Lithuanians, Glenn, Daiva and Lithuania. And it was looking, what is a good life? What makes for a good life? And they were looking particularly at the experience of people who were workers, and particularly people who were in very precarious work situations. And I think that project was interesting because it gave the people who were involved in it gave them that sort of provoking to actually act, and to realise that actually even though at times, in terms of the way global capital, global labour operates, and that we're just like little things at the end of this huge chain, actually, we can act, and that's one of our powers. But sometimes we just need to be helped to find ways in which we can make an act that can have an impact. And by impact I mean that, I suppose one of the words that's always missing in this term globalization is just it's about human persons, it's about people. It's not just about labour, it's not just about capital, it's not just about work, it's about life and people's lives.